Hey everyone, Alex Fans going to get you guys another video. Today I just wanted to talk about Ultraman Mebius for you folks. And real quick, I wanted to get into a little bit of a story or introduction. The reason why I'm going on this tangent is because there are actually a good amount of my viewers that really like when I go in depth about my personal experience with a franchise, a series, or a movie that I'm referring to. The reason why I mention this is because in one of my videos about a year ago, Godzilla King of the Monsters review, I just jumped straight into the movie and ranted on it for nearly an hour, but I didn't really give any of my own personal reflections on the movie or how I felt while watching it or the experience leading up to it. And this was definitely brought up by Infinite Godzilla, aka the Pigeon Returns video. Is a really nice YouTuber, I'll link him in the description below, where he had said that I overall had a negative opinion about this movie, about that particular movie before even watching it, and thus that may have influenced me to have a very biased perspective. But in fact, it was a little bit of the opposite. I was actually really excited to see Godzilla King of the Monsters. I'd gone to see it at a theater that was pretty close to me, and it was a theater I had gone to so many times that I know the area like the back of my hand or head. How is the phrase? I don't know. Whatever the phrase is, it's pretty weird because you can't really know the back of your head because you can't see the back of your head unless you have a mirror. It's literally impossible to see the back of your head. But either way, though, when you see Godzilla King of the Monsters, when I saw it at least, I was really excited to see it. I was in a place of familiarity. I was getting snacks that I really enjoyed. I also went to an arcade that was there. I had a really fun time leading up to seeing Godzilla King of the Monsters. But it's when I actually sat down and watched the movie that I realized the amount of disgust that I had for it. And maybe I don't have that much hatred towards the movie anymore, because I haven't actually watched it since seeing it in theaters. So maybe if I watch it again sometime, I'll really enjoy it. I don't know. But either way, though, enough about Godzilla. Let's talk about Ultraman Mebius. Now, Ultraman Mebius, in my opinion, is one of the better Ultra series that have come out in the Heisei era. I know that Mebius is really popular within the Ultraman community, and in my opinion, Mebius definitely had a large impact on the future Ultra series that came after it. But in my opinion, Ultraman Mebius has truly fallen from grace. Now, why do I say that? Well, it's because I believe that Mebius has been sort of killed off as a character. He hasn't been killed in the sense that he's actually dead and can never come back, but they've really done a sleek job of slowly writing him out little by little. Now, there are lots of other Ultraman characters that can be viewed as underrated and underused. I know that there are a lot of people that like Powered. Looking at you, Cooper, if you're watching this video, I know you love Powered. There's also Great and Neos and Max. A lot of those Ultras don't really get used. But what I will say for Mebius is that he had a lot going for him. Mebius had a long, typical, I believe it was 50 episode series, around that amount. He also had several movies and guidance to follow with the series, as well as a side story just for the secondary Ultra Hikari. I mean, if I recall, I don't really think that many secondary Ultras get a side story. I didn't see Agul get a side story. Agul just showed up in Gaia, he fought Gaia, and then boom, they're good guys all of a sudden. Well, it's because he had a different philosophical perspective that conflicted with the main character, but either way, I didn't really see him with a side story. Justice gets a movie, but the movie is still mostly just about Cosmos, and since then Justice hasn't returned at all. Victory gets a side story, but that's only after Zero himself got one. Overall, Mebius had so much lore and character establishment and overall property to surround it. And suddenly, to see that mostly forgotten about and tossed away and never really mentioned, it's just a really weird retcon in my opinion. Now, Ultraman Mebius, he has a very unique perspective in Ultraman because most Ultras, they come to Earth or they're already on Earth for whatever reason, and they're just already powerful. They have all their powers unlocked, they have their different modes, they may unlock a new mode or fusion in the future, but for now, they're at their peak level. Mebius, on the other hand, took it from a very unique perspective, where he starts off as a rookie, and he has to go through trials and tribulations to be able to unlock his true potential. And along the way, he encounters some very powerful threats, but he also gets the help from his fellow brothers in arms. So, I think that Ultraman Mebius was a really neat anniversary series. Even if you had never watched any of the other Ultraman series, such as the original Ultraman, Ultraman Jack, Father of Ultra, you don't even know who he is. If you had never even seen a lot of these prior Ultra shows from the Showa era, I'm pretty sure that you would still feel a sense of nostalgia for it, just because you see how far Ultraman as a franchise has come. Or you may also feel inspired to go watch those past shows, just so you can see all the different kinds of references and Easter eggs that pop up in them. And it's really neat. And if you're a person who have watched those prior Showa shows, it's really nice to see everything come back full circle after all of these decades. So, in regards to Mebius, I think that Mebius really was a solid series. It just had a lot of emotional weight, had a good amount of comedy to where it didn't overshadow a lot of the narrative story. It had a lot of villains, but these villains weren't necessarily push each other around. You had your episodic episodes, but you also had your episodes that tied into the greater narrative that was at hand. Sometimes it would be about Bogle, sometimes it would be about Hikari, or sometimes it would be about the 4 Heavenly Kings and Alien Emperor coming to the stage of planet Earth. But, in my opinion, Ultraman Mebius has really just been forgotten about. And why do I say he's been forgotten about? Well, it's because the actor for Mirai has unfortunately gone on to his personal hobby and his true passion, cooking. So now he's no longer acting, and he's no longer playing the role of Mirai. Because of this, Tsuburaya Productions decided to make Ultra Galaxy. And Ultra Galaxy is a really solid series in of itself. It doesn't have any Ultraman characters except for a sort of cameo special where Ultraman does appear to fight King Joe. But outside of that, it's mostly just Ultraman monsters fighting and with these Rayonics that have their little Rayonic Battlenizers and them summoning monsters to be able to fight. And it's a really neat series, but I don't necessarily think it's my favorite, or maybe it's in my top 15 favorites. I'm personally more of an Ultraman person, but that's just me. I do give them credit for trying something unique. And then there's also Ultra 7X. I think Ultra 7X is a little bit of a hit or miss. I know that it's not very popular, and it's some people's least favorite Ultra series, but in my opinion, Ultra 7X has some truly hidden gems within them. Hidden gems. Wow, I just made a Adam Sandler reference. Anyway, if you take a look to Ultra Galaxy, it had a movie that followed up with it. And I think a lot of people actually saw the movie for Ultra Galaxy before they even watched Ultra Galaxy. That movie is, what was it, Ultra Galaxy Legend, the movie. And I think that movie is really interesting, but it's also really infuriating at the same time. I remember after watching Mebius and his different movies, I got to the Ultra Galaxy Legend movie, and I remember there were about 8 parts of it on YouTube. This was years ago when I watched it. There were about 8 parts on YouTube, and I remember watching all 8 parts and thinking, this is insane! I was just literally shocked. You have Ultraman Abellio. He's so powerful that he just rips apart Taro and Mebius and Hikari and Jack. He just goes through all of them like butter. And I remember just thinking, wow, Abellio is really strong. But there's one part of the movie that really made me laugh when I was younger. But it's this scene that I personally believe nowadays to be the true death of Mebius. That is when Abellio is attacking the Land of Light. There's one part where Mebius gets in his way, and Abellio uses the Ginga Battlenizers to throw Mebius into space. And I remember seeing that and thinking, that was the funniest thing ever. Mebius just getting tossed into space. And if I recall correctly, Abellio manages to fly past Mebius, and he's still floating there in space. But only after Abellio flies past him does Mebius decide to break free from the little energy bind that he was in. And I was thinking, well, gee, Mebius, you could have really freed yourself at any moment and gotten right back into the fight. It's not like you were killed or knocked out in complete incapacitation, but oh well, Bellio's plot armor, so they couldn't do that to him. And so I remember thinking, wow, Mebius, he's already gotten taken out of the fight. But as the movie progressed, we were introduced to a brand new Ultra called Ultraman Zero. And I remember thinking, wow, Zero's really neat. He's the son of one of my favorite Ultras, Ultra 7. And although at that point I hadn't even watched Ultra 7, it was just still really neat to see that a really prominent Ultra had a son in the form of Zero, and he was also trained by one of the greatest martial arts in the Ultra franchise, Ultraman Leo. So seeing that made me really excited for Ultraman Zero. And when Ultraman Zero appeared in the monster graveyard, he just annihilated so many monsters and aliens. And he eventually got to Abellio, and the two were an even match for each other. Nobody else could take on Abellio, not even Ultraman Dyna. It's really weird. The Ultra Galaxy Legend movie is weird because Ultraman Dyna comes in from another universe, and if you don't know who Ultraman Zero is, you might think he would be the movie hero, because he comes in from a completely alternate timeline and specifically shows up. And especially when Ultraman Dyna is fighting Nars, he's just Asuka. He's just so cocky and confident. He's thinking that he's got everything in the bag, and he just takes out Nars so easily. I almost thought for a second when watching the movie when I was younger that Ultraman Dyna was going to be the hero. I was thinking, wait, Dyna? He's in the Showa universe? He's not in the Neo Frontier universe? Oh, Dyna, he's going to take on Abellio, and then Abellio defeats Dyna? I'm thinking, oh, I guess it's going to be Zero then. I mean, I really expected Zero, but there was a split moment where I thought that Dyna was actually going to save the day, and that would have been really interesting if Dyna saved everybody from Abellio. But I still think that it should have been Mebius. And here's the reason why. Mebius, as I mentioned before, he had gone through an entire series, and he had trained and fought against these really powerful monsters. In his movies, he fought against U-Killer Saurus, and then he fought against Giga Chimera. Each time, the threat scale got larger and bigger, until eventually you get to Abellio. And Abellio is the epitome of all of these monsters and the Battlenizers that were also used. He's just a really powerful being who was infused with Ray blood. And so I thought, oh, Mebius is going to probably defeat Abellio, but instead it's Ultraman Zero. And I think it's really neat that Ultraman Zero fights Abellio. From a conceptual writing standpoint, it makes sense, because Ultraman Zero and Ultraman Abellio both parallel with each other. Ultraman Abellio and Ultraman Zero were both exiled for the same reason, but the two went on separate paths, and thus their paths realigned so that the two can fight each other. Both were young, brash, and arrogant, and both of them tried to seek power and were exiled for it. The difference is that one decided to gain power through a natural way by being possessed by Ray blood and thus turning him completely evil, while the other decided to train hard and get power from Ultraman Leo, as well as understand the morals and values of trying to protect others, whereas Abellio didn't necessarily learn those morals and values. So when the two fight, it's a complete and utter ideological struggle. However, even though that makes sense from a writing standpoint, from a power standpoint, it doesn't make any sense for Zero to fight Abellio, because Zero literally has no real fights under his belts. He's just fought Leo so many times. I get it, Leo is really strong, but if you compare the stuff that Mebius has done, Mebius fought with Leo as well, and has defeated so many powerful enemies. The different Showa aliens, the different Showa monsters. He's fought the Choju, the super monsters. These monsters that actually slaughtered the original Ultra Brothers. Mebius has managed to go through them over time. And so Mebius has completely redefined himself through different modes, and he's refined his skills in terms of fighting and his abilities. But then you have Ultraman Zero, an Ultraman who literally has no experience, all of a sudden is not only better than Mebius, but all of a sudden can beat the main villain. And not even just defeat the main villain, but also take on an army of monsters at the graveyard. And I know that they're supposed to be weaker, but it's still the principle. And this is why, in my opinion, the Mega Monster Ultra Galaxy Legend movie ruins Ultraman in a way. Not only does it ruin Mebius' character and frankly kills him off in that movie, but it also ruins power scaling. And I know that again they're supposed to be graveyard, weaker, that's the explanation, but it's just kind of a retcon in my opinion that is a little bit of an excuse for why the Ultras aren't necessarily able to defeat all the monsters. I mean, I get it, it's a movie and it's not really supposed to make sense, but to each their own. So, then you have the next movie, Ultraman Zero Revenge Abellio. And I know this movie is kind of a hit or miss, but in my opinion, watching Mega Monster Ultra Galaxy Legend and then going on to see the Revenge Abellio was a huge step down. The movie it's kind of a boring movie in my opinion. It has some really neat moments in it, and it has Archbellio, and Archbellio is able to destroy a planet, but the movie just feels really boring, especially compared to Ultra Galaxy Legend. It just lacks a lot of the imagination. And so here we have again where Zero defeats Bellio, but this time he does it with the Ultimate Force Zero. He comprises himself of Genebot and Glenfire and Mirror Knight, and they manage to take on the evil of Bellio. And so Zero, he keeps coming back. He comes back in Saga, and in my opinion, I think that Mebius should have been in Saga. Maybe that's just me. I just think that seeing Mebius in a world where it's destroyed would have had a lot more impact for Mebius, because if you remember back to Mebius, in his very first episode, Mebius fought Dinosaur, and everyone was telling him that he had done a terrible job because the city was destroyed. But what would Mebius, how would he feel if he came to an Earth where literally everything had already been destroyed by Alien Bat? And I know that the actor couldn't come back, but Mebius, my argument for Mebius is that Mebius not having his actor is not necessarily an excuse. Because if you take a look to Zero, Zero's host isn't consistent. In nearly every reappearance of Zero on Earth, they give him a new host. Revenge of Bellio gave him a new host. He didn't even have a host originally. Revenge of Bellio gave him a host. Saga gave him a host named Taiga, ironically. Ultraman Geeve gives him Lido. He gets a new host each time. And so Mebius could have in theory done the same thing. And I think it would have been really interesting to see the younger Mirai, who's a little bit younger than Asuka, but the two have a little bit of a contrast. Mirai is a lot more humble, but he's younger, whereas Asuka is a lot older, but he's a little bit more arrogant. But as time goes on, Asuka has also humbled himself, and seeing those two clash with Cosmos would have just been a really nice and compelling chemistry that I would have really liked to see. But instead we got Ultraman Zero, who's just Zero, he's just versatile, I guess. He doesn't really have much of a character. I don't really see Zero having much of a character, to be honest. I see Mebius having more of a character. And so this is where we come all the way through to New Generation. Now, New Generation, in my opinion, should have been Mebius teaching the newer Ultras. And why do I say this? Well, because, listen to this. This is probably going to blow your minds. Maybe not. Whatever I say doesn't really blow people's minds these days. But Mebius' whole origin was that he was a rookie who was training under the Ultra Brothers. But years later, Mebius could discover the New Generation Ultras and teach them. Wouldn't that be an awesome way to complete Mebius' character arc? He starts off as the inexperienced Ultra, the rookie who makes mistakes, but now, just about a decade later, he is now the one who's training the new generation when he was just in their same position not too long ago, showing that Mebius has ultimately mastered himself. He's a true Ultra brother, member of the Ultra Garrison, and he is just complete. But instead that role is given to Ultraman Zero, to where Ultraman Zero is the Ultra who has to train the new generation and give them different types of devices. It feels really clunky, in my opinion, because Ultraman Zero that doesn't really fit his character in a way. And I get that he also goes through that character development, but it feels that Ultraman Zero in of himself is really separate from the other Ultras. First of all, Ultraman Zero from day one has been a rebel. He has always been against the status quo. He doesn't really affiliate himself with the other Ultra Brothers. And if you think maybe that was just an Ultra Galaxy legend, Ultraman Zero in Revenge Abellio goes out of his way to establish an entire team just dedicated to him. So seeing Zero all of a sudden paired with the other Ultra Brothers just seems a little bit out of place, because Zero was supposed to be kind of doing his own thing. Mebius, on the other hand, had been with the other Ultra Brothers since day one. Since episode 1, he was with Mother and Father of Ultra. That shows that Mebius has a little bit more of a relationship to the Ultra Brothers. But all of a sudden, Zero, this character who has really separated himself from the Ultra Brothers, is all of a sudden supposed to be with them, as well as training the new generation Ultras, just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And I get that I defended an Ultra Galaxy fight where it rhymed like poetry in the sense that it all came back full circle, but that doesn't mean necessarily that it fit the character of Zero. It's just a story element that made them all using Zero's abilities fit together. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I agreed with the character that was specifically used to give them the abilities and the fusions in the first place. Because again, in my opinion, it should have been Ultraman Mebius. And if you take a look to Mebius, overall, a lot more fits with Mebius. Let's start off with Ultraman Ginga. So, already, if you just look at Ultraman Ginga, is it me, or does the Mebius brace look a lot like the Strium brace? Just me? Well, that's something that just came to mind. Either way though, Ultraman Mebius should have been in Ginga or had some sort of influence in a movie or something, because Ultraman Ginga is an Ultra that is being taught by Ultraman Taro. And who else had a really good relationship with Ultraman Taro? Ultraman Mebius. In fact, Ultraman Mebius even learned the Ultra Dynamite from Ultraman Taro, and Taro had come to help Ultraman Mebius during the series. But to see Ultraman Zero help out Ginga and Victory in the Ginga S movie just doesn't really make sense in my opinion, because there's not really much of a connection. Zero just helps out Ginga and Victory because he can simply travel to other dimensions and he's been pursuing a Telgar. But how neat would it have been if Ultraman Mebius was helping out Ginga and Victory? Mebius could look at Ginga and Victory and say, oh hey, that reminds me of the relationship that I once had with Hikari. And so when Hikari appears in Ultra Fight Victory, it all ties in together. Isn't that crazy? I just thought of that because Hikari did appear in Ultra Fight Victory. Just Ultraman Mebius could have really made everything come back full circle. Ultraman Mebius and Hikari with Ginga and Victory would have just made a lot more sense than just Ultraman Zero, Ultraman Zero, Ultraman Zero appears. Because Zero doesn't really have that much of a relationship with another Ultra, in a sense that parallels with Ginga Victory and Hikari and Mebius. And again, it just would have made a lot more sense. Because Ultraman Zero in the Ginga S movie, he just shoots a laser and boom, they just get the fusion brace. But how cool would it have been if Ultraman Mebius has his Mebius brace and he gives Hikaru and Sho the Ginga Victory brace? That just would have been so amazing. And it's really interesting too, because Mebius appears in the Ginga S movie, but his role is just really minuscule and has no real impact on the story. So now let's take a look to Ultraman X. Ultraman X, in my opinion, would have been a perfect opportunity for Mebius to return in. I mean, Ultraman Max appeared in Ultraman X, and so did Ultraman Nexus. Now, I know what you may be thinking. You may think that, oh, they're going to bring back Mebius in Ultraman X because the actor for Mirai doesn't want to act anymore. And so Ultraman Max came back instead because the actor for Ultraman Max's human host managed to come back in X. Well, my answer to that is that Ultraman Nexus came back in X, and he wasn't with Nagi or any of the other main characters. He wasn't with... oh god, I can't even think of the name of the main character in Nexus, the main guy. My brain is just dead. Either way, though, Ultraman Mebius redefines himself each time, and that makes sense, but Ultraman Mebius could have easily come back with an Ultraman X. And I think that would have been so amazing, because, get this, there's a lot of parallels between Ultraman Mebius and Ultraman X. Both of them are Ultra Series to have a really solid human force that fights against the monsters. On top of that, Ultraman Mebius' team guys use the Marquette monsters, similar to how Zeo uses the Cybercard monsters. So the two teams really use monsters together. And how neat would it have been to have seen Ultraman X with Ultraman Mebius? That just would have been... Their designs are even kind of similar too, if you think about it. Both have these red outlines on their outer body, but mostly have gray that define their body as well. So in my opinion, Ultraman X could have easily fit with Ultraman Mebius. And there's another parallel within the characters of Mirai and Daichi. So, Mirai is a human form of Ultraman Mebius, and there's one part of Mebius where Mirai visits the family of the human form that he's based off of to tell them that, I'm sorry that your son had passed away, but Mebius's parents instead tell them, Mirai's parents tell them, Mirai, that instead you should be proud and go off and experience the world for yourself, and it's what our son would have wanted. Daichi, in that very same manner, had lost his parents. So you see how it's a little bit of a parallel between the two? With the parents in Mebius, they lost their son, but their son came back in the form of a human form for Ultraman Mebius. In Ultraman X, the son lost his parents, but Daichi eventually became Ultraman X. Isn't that such a neat parallel? That is a brilliant parallel in my opinion. But instead, nope. You got Ultraman Zero appearing with Knuckle, and X and Zero don't really have much in common. But Mirai and Daichi have the family bond together, and Daichi, his whole concept is about uniting and believing in your friends and allies. Do you know what other Ultra had that same theme? Mirai, when he learned about the bond between his team member and guys. It would have made so much more sense for Daichi and Mirai to meet together and have a really solid episode. But instead we got Ultraman Zero. So now let's go on to Ultraman Orb. Ultraman Orb is a little bit of an independent show. He just does things with the fusions, but Mebius does appear as a fusion in Ultraman Mebius in the form of Burmite, along with Ultraman Taro. See, Mebius and Taro really have a lot in common, which is why I think that Mebius should have appeared in the Ginga S movie. It would have made everything come back full circle. Taro gives Ginga the Shri Embrace, and Mebius gives Ginga the Ginga Victory Brace. It just would have made so much more sense than just saying, oh hey, Zero pops up. That's the thing about Zero. He just pops up and boom, he's just part of the story and he just has that connection there. As I mentioned before about Ultraman Orb, it's a little bit of an independent series. Ultraman Zero actually appears in the Orb movie. And it's really interesting because overall though, I think that Mebius could have fit in a lot better into the Orb movie. Because think about it like this. Ultraman Orb is an anniversary Ultra. Ultraman Mebius is an anniversary Ultra. The two could have crossed paths. And can you imagine how amazing that would have been if Ultraman Mebius, the anniversary show, and Ultraman Orb from the anniversary show crossed together and teamed up? And Ultra 7 was there. Do you know who else fought with Ultra 7? Ultraman Mebius. I mean, in Ultraman Mebius, in the later part of the show, there was the incident with Glowzam, who was a part of the Four Heavenly Kings, and Dan Moriboshi appeared just as he did in the Orb movie and transformed into Ultra 7. Can you imagine how cool that would have been if Ultraman Mebius was helped by Ultra 7 once again, but this time he was with the new anniversary Ultra, Ultraman Orb? That just would have been fantastic. And Ginga and Victory, who also received help from Mebius in the Ginga S movie, also good to see Mebius again. It would have made so much sense. And to think, here's another thing they have in common. Ultraman Orb, the movie, features Temperor, Alien Guts, and Super Alien Hippolyto. Do you know who else fought those aliens? Ultraman Mebius. It just would have made a lot of sense if Ultraman Mebius appeared in the Orb movie. It just would have taken off. Can you imagine Guy, Daichi, and Mirai all teaming up? That's the dream team right there. That would have just been fantastic. But instead, we got Ultraman Zero cameo at the beginning and the end. And Ultraman Zero tells Guy about Disastro exposition for some future battle that will never happen. And then you get down to Ultra Fight Orb. I think Ultra Fight Orb, Mebius, doesn't really matter there. It still could have been Zero in my opinion, because Ultraman Orb does get a Miriam Slugger, and it does make sense with Ultra 7 helping out Ultraman Zero. It's still the Showa Ultra Brothers, so it could have been Mebius again in that situation, but seeing Ultra 7 help out Zero just fit a little bit better in my opinion, so that one's a little bit of where Zero could make sense. And even then, Ultra Fight Orb isn't even that good of a series. But in regards to everything with Ultraman Orb, it still would have been nice to have seen him in the Orb movie with Mebius and Ultraman Orb. And then Ultraman Geed actually. Ultraman Geed is one of the few instances where I think that Ultraman Zero also makes sense. But the thing is that Geed has a little bit of an inconsistency, because Ultraman Geed was being trained by Zero in a way, but now Ultraman Z is the actual student of Ultraman Zero, so it feels as if they're kind of repeating the storyline. I don't know, it just seems a little bit of a repetition going on there. Now, in regards to Ultraman RUH, again, Ultraman RUH doesn't even really feature that much. It's very hit or miss. At the end of the day, the Ultraman RUH movie is really separate from a lot of incidents, because it just happens, in my opinion. I think that's literally what I said in my actual review. The movie just happens. But in Ultra Galaxy Fight, how cool would it have been if Ultraman Mebius, who had trained the new Generation Ultras, gets captured by Ultra Dark Killer, and the new Generation Ultras had to use all their abilities that they got from Mebius to actually help out Mebius. That just would have been so neat in my opinion. But instead, it's Ultraman Zero, and this time he's with Grigio. Actually, Ultraman Zero and Ultra Woman Grigio, I don't really see that happening together. I think Ultraman Mebius and Ultra Woman Grigio would have been really neat, because get this, imagine Mebius talking to Grigio, and Mebius says, "Okay, Grigio, I know that you're just a burden, you're literally a burden to your brothers, but get this, you're gonna get stronger, you're gonna protect the city, but make sure to not make the mistakes that I made." And so Mebius could tell Grigio about the time that he nearly destroyed the city, everything around him when he fought Dinosaur. But this time, Grigio can learn a huge and valuable lesson from Mebius, because Mebius will be able to relate with Grigio, because Mebius will be able to see himself in the younger Grigio, because he too was in that very same position not too long ago when he first went to Earth, and so Mebius will be able to bestow wisdom upon Grigio. That just would have been so awesome. That would have been so cool in my opinion. And also, again, the Mebius Hikari parallel with Rasa and Blue. They could have just done so much. And also, another thing, with Ultra Dark Killer has a past with Ultraman Taro. You know who else has a past with Ultraman Taro? You guessed it, Ultraman Mebius. Ultraman Zero literally has no connection to Ultra Dark Killer, Ultraman Tregia, or even, he has no connection with Ultra Dark Killer or Ultraman Tregia. But Taro and Mebius both have that connection to Tregia and Ultra Dark Killer, and it just would have been absolutely perfect in my opinion, just flawless. But then when you go down the line, Ultraman Taiga, this is where Ultraman Taiga could have received a lot of that potential. In one of the episodes of Ultraman Taiga, Ultraman Zero appears to fight Tregia. Why specifically Ultraman Zero? Well, I can understand Zero. I'm going to play Devil's Advocate and defend Zero in this video. I can understand why Zero would appear in Taiga, because it makes sense. Zero is the son of Seven, Taiga is the son of Taro. You got the two sons of the Showa Ultra Brothers teaming up to fight Tregia as well as Imitation Belial. But it also could have been, in a way, Ultraman Mebius, and this would have had even further a little bit of a ripple effect for Ultraman Z, and this is the reason why. So, with Ultraman Zero was trained by Leo, who was trained by Seven, and Leo is training the son of his former master. Well, how cool would it have been if Ultraman Taro was training Ultraman Mebius, and Ultraman Mebius trained his son, Ultraman Taiga, and so that would have made everything come back full circle all these decades later with these Ultra training each other. But also, that could have tied into Ultraman Z, because Beta Smash could have been made up of not just Ace, Taro, and Ultraman, but instead, Beta Smash could have been made up of Taro, Ultraman Mebius, and Ultraman Taiga. Just how cool would that have been, right? You get two master-student-son combos with an Ultraman Z. Just food for thought, am I right? Just what could have been. What could have been an Ultraman, am I right? Anyway, Ultraman Taiga, I can understand Zero, but I can also understand Mebius. And it just would have been so cool. I think there's in fact a video by Bancha, or aka Ultra Chu, where Mebius actually fights Ultraman Taiga. And so that's just a little bit of wishful thinking, am I right? When you get down the line Ultraman Z, you can't really change him too much because he's being trained by Zero. And whether or not you can replace Zero with Mebius and Ultraman Z, that's really up to change, up to possibility. Ultraman Zero having a student in Ultraman Z, that's okay, I suppose. It doesn't really hurt or change too much. But yeah, overall, I think that Mebius, just from what I talked about, could have had a greater impact on the new generation shows. I hope you all have enjoyed this video. Like, comment, share, subscribe. What do you guys think of Mebius? Would you have liked to have seen more Ultraman movies and shows? Have Mebius return more than Zero? Or are you satisfied with Ultraman Zero? Anyway, I'll be seeing you guys next video. Bye!